Here's my take. At first glance, it would seem easy to explain last Tuesday's election as part of a 2024 global wave against incumbents beset by post-COVID turmoil and inflation. The UK saw a huge Tory parliamentary majority turn into its thinnest minority in the party's nearly 200-year history. Germany's governing coalition has collapsed amid soaring unpopularity. Emmanuel Macron's party was crushed in France's parliamentary elections. South Korea's opposition party dominated in a huge parliamentary landslide. And even in Japan, where the ruling LDP party has governed almost uninterrupted since 1955, the party lost its House of Representatives majority. So it might have been preordained that Kamala Harris, representing the incumbent administration, lost decisively as well. But Harris could have bucked the trend. The American economy is doing better than all these other nations. Employment is strong, wages are up, inflation is down, productivity is soaring. More importantly, Donald Trump has many strengths as a political figure, but he also has many weaknesses. Let's recall that after January 6, 2021, Trump's approval rating was down to 34% in a CNN poll. In a Marquette Law School poll matchup a year later, Joe Biden was beating him by 10 points nationally, 43-33. Then came the overturning of Roe v. Wade and the 2022 midterms, in which the Republicans did very badly for a midterm and MAGA candidates in particular got crushed. Trump's favorability ratings sank to 31% in a CNN poll, with an unfavorable rating at a staggering 60%. Even Republicans were disillusioned with him. At this point, Trump had led a Republican Party that lost its House majority in 2018, its Senate majority and the presidency in the 2020 cycle, and then fared historically badly in those 2022 midterms. In December 2022, Ron DeSantis was outpolling Trump easily among Republicans in a Wall Street Journal poll. That was the Democratic Party's strongest moment since Trump's arrival on the political landscape. But they blew it. The New York Times estimates that Harris will lose the national popular vote by about 1.5 points, a first for Democrats since 2004. Global inflation is something that was hard to shut down, but there were other issues the Democrats flubbed, which inflamed the opposition and depressed their base. I'm going to talk about them here because it's the right time to do a postmortem. But to avoid appearing to have 20/20 hindsight, I should say that I have noted each of these mistakes at the time, often provoking angry responses from the left. The first big error was the Biden administration's blindness to the collapse of the immigration system and the chaos at the border. An asylum system that was meant for a small number of persecuted individuals was being used by millions to gain legal entry. Instead of shutting it down, liberals branded anyone protesting as heartless and racist. They missed a massive shift in American public opinion in just a few years. In 2020, the percentage of Americans who wanted to decrease immigration was just 28%. By this year, it was 55%. When Kamala Harris went on The View and was asked how she would have differed from Biden, instead of basically saying nothing different, she should have said, "I would have shut down the border early and hard." The second error was an overzealous misuse of law to punish Trump. The most egregious of the cases pursued was Alvin Bragg's one in New York, one that even he was once skeptical of, but was reportedly pressured by some on the left into pursuing. Some cases, like the Georgia one, were legitimate, but the host of them piled on in rapid succession gave the impression that the legal system was being weaponized to get Trump. It confirmed to his base what it had always believed, that overeducated urban liberals were hypocrites, happy to bend rules and norms when it suited their purposes. It's worth noting that in this week's election, a CNN exit poll found that among those who believe that democracy in the U.S. is threatened, a majority supported Trump. Lawfare turned Trump from being a loser into a victim, and as his indictments grew, his campaign contributions surged and his poll numbers solidified. The final error is a more diffuse one, the dominance of identity politics on the left, which made it push for all kinds of DEI policies that largely came out of the urban academic bubble, but alienated many mainstream voters. There's an irony in claiming to be pro-Latino by insisting that people use the term Latinx, only to discover that Latinos themselves think the word is weird. This kind of obsession made Democrats view people too much through their ethnic or racial or gender identity, and it made them miss, for example, that working-class Latinos were moving toward Trump perhaps because they were socially conservative, or liked his macho rhetoric, or even agreed with his hardline stance on immigration. One of Trump's most effective ads on trans issues had a tagline:
Kamala is for they, them. President Trump is for you.
The problem is much deeper than simply one about nouns and pronouns. The entire focus on identity has morphed into something deeply illiberal, judging people by the color of their skin rather than the content of their character. Similarly, university speech codes and cancel culture have become ways that the left censors or restricts that most cherished of liberal ideas, freedom of speech. One simple way to think about the lessons of this election is that liberals cannot achieve liberal goals, however virtuous, by illiberal means. Go to cnn.com/Fareed for a link to my Washington Post column this week. And let's get started. In 2016, when Trump won the first time, much was made of the fact that Hillary Clinton actually won the popular vote by 2 percentage points. The Electoral College may have chosen Trump, but the majority of Americans didn't. In 2020, he lost the popular vote to Joe Biden by more than 4 points, and he lost the election. But this year, he is projected to have narrowly won the popular vote. If projections hold, it'll be the first time a Republican has won the popular vote in 20 years. I'm joined now by two very smart people, the New York Times opinion columnist Ezra Klein, the author of the book Why We're Polarized, and David Frum, a staff writer at The Atlantic and a former speechwriter for President George W. Bush. Ezra, so how, first, fundamentally, how much of this was incumbency penalty that it seems to have affected every election in the last 18 months? And how much of this is something special that we should analyze?
So if you chart how every incumbent government has done in elections, you say over the past 15 months, 2 years, virtually every one of them gets annihilated in the election, by much more, frankly, than the Democrats did this time. So the Tories in UK do terribly. You look north, Justin Trudeau in Canada is incredibly unpopular. The government in Germany is falling apart. We're seeing center-right and center-left governments go down. So if you look at the coalition here, one very simple way of thinking about it is in 2020 and 2024, you have very similar coalitions in the election. And Trump is doing much better in 2020 also among Hispanic and Black voters than people expected. But in 2020, Trump is the incumbent. There's a pandemic. People are mad at him. He's not very good at being president. So you have this coalition, but Trump has a -3 point incumbent penalty. Democrats win by 4, and they win the election. This year, Biden is president. The Biden-Harris administration are the incumbents. People are mad. It's a post-inflation period. We're seeing angry electorates at incumbents everywhere. Call it again a -3, -2 incumbent penalty. Democrats lose by 1 to 2 points in the popular vote, which is what the projections show. So on that level, maybe you don't need to explain that much at all. But here's why I don't just take that and throw it around myself like a shawl and comfort myself to sleep. They lost by 1.5 points in the battleground states, right? When they were actually able to keep it very narrow compared to a lot of other incumbent governments.
175,000 votes in those 3 states would have flipped the electoral college.
Yes, and they probably lose the popular vote maybe by 1.5 points-ish, right? So that means strategic decisions could have really mattered here. When you're talking about a swing of 2 percentage points of a vote, that is not something that only structure can explain. It is actually, they were actually able to keep it close enough that maybe doing something different would have mattered.
Right, that's an interesting point. The point is not that it was a blowout and that's why the Democrats should be soul searching. It wasn't a blowout. They could have won this. Mm-hmm. And David, what about the economy? I mean, why is it that with what is unarguably the strongest economy in the world at this point, it didn't work. Was it a time lag? Was it that inflation matters a lot more than we thought it would?
If Donald Trump had presided over this economy, as he soon will, he would have said again and again, this is the greatest economy since the 1960s. Things are great, unemployment. The Democrats are inhibited. That if there is someone in America who is sad, it is impossible for a Democratic president and a Democratic administration to speak positively about what they've done. It is a remark. I'm not a Democrat. I marvel at this because there's so many veto points in the party, and this creates a very dangerous situation now. What do Democrats love on this earth more than soul searching? I don't know. They love it. It may be mutual accusation and mutual recrimination. That's the one thing they like more than social, blaming each other. They hate each other. It's a very messy coalition, and they're now about to turn on each other. Should we have gone left on populism? Should we blame this part of our coalition or that part of our coalition? And meanwhile, the emergency is going to start immediately.